The great hall of the Galactic Council was filled with worried voices. Representatives from dozens of alien species sat in their special chairs, each designed for their unique body shapes. The air buzzed with different languages being translated by computers. But everyone was talking about the same thing. The Zephyrian Empire was attacking again. Admiral Jake Morrison stood near the back of the hall, watching the chaos unfold. He was one of only 3 humans in the entire building. His dark blue uniform looked plain compared to the colorful robes and metallic suits worn by the alien delegates. The small patch on his shoulder showed Earth's flag, a tiny blue and green circle that most aliens barely noticed. On the main screen at the front of the hall, images flashed by showing the destruction, burning space stations, destroyed colony ships, families running for their lives. The Zephyrians had been moving through the Outer Rim territories like a deadly storm, taking over every planet and moon they found. The situation grows worse each day, announced Council Prime Zethkari, his 6 arms waving dramatically. He was tall and thin, with purple skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights. The Zephyrian fleet now controls 15 star systems. Their dreadnoughts are unstoppable. Each of their warships is the size of a small moon. Jake felt his jaw tighten as he watched the footage. He had seen similar destruction before, back when Earth was fighting its own wars. But this was different. This was happening to innocent people who had never hurt anyone. A Vorthan delegate stood up, its crystal body ringing like a bell as it moved. What are our options? Our combined fleets cannot match their firepower. They have over 300 capital ships, each one more powerful than anything we possess. Murmurs of agreement filled the hall. Jake could hear the fear in their voices even through the translation devices. These beings had known peace for so long that they had forgotten how to fight a real war. Perhaps we should consider negotiation, suggested an Altarian, its massive form hunched over its speaking device. Maybe the Zephyrians will accept tribute instead of conquest. You mean surrender, Jake said loudly, surprising himself. The hall grew quiet as hundreds of alien eyes turned toward him. He took a deep breath and walked forward. With respect, Council Prime, that's not negotiation. That's giving up. Zethkari's expression showed annoyance. Admiral Morrison, your species has been part of this council for less than 50 years. Perhaps you should listen and learn before offering opinions on matters of galactic security. Jake stopped at the speaking platform reserved for official statements. He looked up at the towering alien leader and spoke clearly. My species has been fighting wars for thousands of years. We know what happens when you try to negotiate with bullies. They just take what you offer and then demand more. A sound that might have been laughter came from the Nebulan section. These gas-based creatures floated in their special containers, their forms shifting and changing as they communicated through colored light patterns. The humans think they understand warfare, their translator announced. How amusing. Your entire fleet consists of what? 40 vessels? Zethkari asked, consulting his datapad. The Zephyrians field over 300 capital ships. Your largest warship would barely qualify as an escort vessel by our standards. More sounds of amusement echoed through the hall. Jake felt heat rising in his cheeks, but he kept his voice steady. Size isn't everything in space combat. We've learned that lesson the hard way. Have you indeed? Zethkari leaned forward in his chair. And what exactly has your small planet taught you about fighting wars among the stars? Jake thought about the history lessons every human child learned in school. The ancient battles fought with sticks and stones. The naval wars with wooden ships and iron cannons. The terrible conflicts with aircraft and tanks. The final war that almost destroyed Earth before humanity learned to work together. We've learned that the side that adapts fastest usually wins. We've learned that sometimes the smaller force can defeat the larger one if they're smart about it. How wonderfully optimistic, said the Vorthan delegate, its crystal form chiming with what sounded like mockery. But optimism will not stop. Zephyrian plasma cannons. Jake pulled up his own datapad and activated the hall's main display. Images of human ships appeared on the screen, sleek, angular vessels that looked tiny compared to the massive alien dreadnoughts shown earlier. Give us permission to intervene, and we'll stop the Zephyrian advance. The hall erupted in what could only be described as chaos. The sound that came from dozens of different species, all expressing disbelief at once, was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was like being inside a zoo during feeding time, if the animals could all talk and were trying to argue with each other. "This is madness," Zethkari declared, raising his voice above the noise. "You propose to send your tiny fleet against the most powerful military force in the galaxy. It would be suicide. It would be murder," added the Altarian delegate. "We cannot allow an entire species to throw away their lives in a hopeless gesture." Jake waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "We're not asking you to risk your own ships. We're volunteering to do this ourselves. All we need is official permission to enter the contested systems." "And when your ships are destroyed in the first 5 minutes of combat?" Zethkari asked. "What then? The Zephyrians will use your defeat as proof that resistance is futile. Other species will surrender without even trying to fight." "We won't be defeated," Jake said simply. This statement caused even more laughter and disbelief. A small alien that looked like a walking tree branch actually fell over in its chair from what Jake assumed was the equivalent of laughing too hard. Zethkari stood up to his full height, towering over the human admiral. "The council has heard your proposal, Admiral Morrison. We will now vote on whether to allow human intervention in the Zephyrian crisis." The voting process was quick and predictable. Every major species voted against allowing human involvement. The final tally was announced in solemn tones. "The motion is defeated by a margin of 47-3. The Human Federation is hereby restricted from military action in the contested territories." Jake nodded slowly, then looked up at the Council Prime. "I understand your decision, but I hope you understand that we can't just sit back and watch innocent people get slaughtered. Your species will learn its place in the galactic hierarchy, Admiral," Zethkari replied coldly. "Perhaps this lesson will teach you humility." Jake turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet hall. Behind him, the delegates were already moving on to other business as if the conversation had never happened. But Jake wasn't thinking about their dismissal anymore. He was thinking about 12 ships waiting in the outer system, and the crews, who had volunteered for a mission that everyone else thought was impossible. Sometimes, Jake thought as he reached the door, the best lessons were the ones nobody expected to learn. 3 days after the council meeting, space around Kepler 442 system looked like a graveyard waiting to be filled. The Zephyrian war fleet hung in the darkness like a collection of metal mountains. 60 massive dreadnoughts formed the backbone of the armada, each one bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's surface. Around them, 200 smaller ships moved in precise patterns, their hulls painted with the red and black colors of the Zephyrian Empire. Admiral Vexthok stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Worldbreaker, studying the tactical displays with his 4 yellow eyes. His chitinous exoskeleton clicked softly as he moved. A sound his crew had learned meant their commander was pleased. The bridge around him was dark and functional, lit only by the glow of weapon readouts and targeting systems. "Status report," Vexthok commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems. Lieutenant Karmesh, his communications officer, turned from her station. Her own exoskeleton was younger and smoother than her commander's, marked with the blue stripes that showed her rank. "All ships report ready for orbital bombardment, sir. The colony world has approximately 2 million inhabitants. Our initial strike will eliminate their defensive platforms within the first hour." Vexthok nodded with satisfaction. Harmony Colony had been established by the peaceful Centauri Republic as a farming world. Its people had never known war, had never built weapons designed to kill. They would surrender quickly once they saw what Zephyrian firepower could do to their cities. "Sir," called out the sensor operator from across the bridge. "We're detecting new contacts approaching the system. 12 vessels, heading directly for our position." Vexthok's mandibles clicked together in what might have been amusement. "Reinforcements? What species has decided to interfere with Zephyrian expansion?" The sensor operator worked at his console for a moment, then looked up with what appeared to be confusion. "Sir, the computer identifies them as human vessels. But that can't be correct. The humans were forbidden from entering this system." "Humans Vexthok moved to the main display, watching as 12 small dots appeared on the tactical screen. They were moving in a tight diamond formation, approaching at steady speed without any attempt at stealth or evasion. "Show me detailed scans." The main screen flickered and displayed the human ships in full detail. They were sleek and angular, with smooth hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But what struck Vexthok immediately was their size. His smallest destroyer outmassed the largest human vessel by more than 10 times. 12 ships, he said slowly, then began to laugh. The sound was harsh and grating, like metal scraping against stone. "The humans send 12 ships against our armada of 260 vessels. The laughter spread across the bridge as his officers joined in. Even the usually serious weapons officer seemed amused by the human audacity. Lieutenant Karmesh pulled up comparison charts showing the massive difference in firepower and armor between the two fleets. "Sir, our computer analysis suggests this engagement will last approximately 4 minutes, she reported. "That includes the time needed to target each individual human ship." Vexthok studied the approaching formation more carefully. The human ships maintained perfect spacing, flying in a pattern that would make them easy targets for his gunners. Either these humans were incredibly stupid, or they were planning something that his tactical computers couldn't understand. "Open a channel to all ships," he commanded. "I want every captain to see this. They can use the humans for target practice." The communication system crackled to life, connecting him to every Zephyrian vessel in the fleet. "Attention all commanders. We have 12 human ships approaching our position. They appear to believe they can challenge the might of the Zephyrian Empire. I'm transmitting their positions now. Consider this a training exercise." Laughter and crude jokes filled the communication channels as his captains responded. Some suggested using the humans to test new weapon systems. Others wanted to capture a few ships intact to study human technology. One captain proposed letting the humans get closer so his crew could practice their boarding techniques. The human formation continued its steady approach, showing no signs of fear or hesitation. Vexthok had fought dozens of species across the galaxy, and he recognized the signs of desperation in enemy movements. Ships that knew they were outmatched usually tried evasive maneuvers, attempted to call for help, or simply turned and ran. These humans did none of those things. "Incoming transmission from the lead human vessel," Lieutenant Karamesh announced. "Put it on the main screen," Vexthok ordered. "I want to see what these brave little creatures have to say." The screen flickered and showed the bridge of the human ship. A woman in a dark blue uniform sat in the captain's chair, her brown hair pulled back in a simple style. Her face was calm and professional, showing no trace of the fear that should have been obvious when facing such overwhelming odds. "Zephyrian forces," she said, her voice carrying clearly across space. "This is Captain Lisa Park of the Earth Federation vessel Defiance. You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. This is your only warning." Vexthok stared at the screen for a moment, then threw back his head and laughed harder than he had in years. Around him, his bridge crew joined in until the entire command center echoed with harsh Zephyrian amusement. "Captain Park," he said, making sure his own transmission was being broadcast to every ship in both fleets. "I am Admiral Vexthok of the Zephyrian Empire. Your 12 tiny ships face 260 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy. I suggest you turn around and return to whatever small corner of space your species calls home." Captain Park's expression didn't change. "Admiral, you have 1 minute to begin your withdrawal. After that, we will consider you hostile and respond accordingly." This statement caused even more laughter from the Zephyrian fleet. One of his destroyer captains broke into the channel to offer his own commentary. "Little human, my ship alone carries enough firepower to destroy your entire fleet. Perhaps you should surrender now and we might let some of you live." 30 seconds, Captain Park said calmly. Vexthok decided he had heard enough. "Captain Park, since you seem determined to die heroically, I will grant your wish. All ships prepare to fire. Let's show the galaxy what happens when primitive species challenge Zephyrian power." The human ships continued their approach, maintaining that same perfect diamond formation, Vexthok watched them on his tactical display and shook his head. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen such a pointless display of courage. These humans would be destroyed in seconds, but at least they would die fighting. 10 seconds. To optimal firing range, his weapons officer reported. All ships stand ready, Vexthok announced across the fleet channels. This will be over quickly. But as the countdown reached 0, something unexpected happened. The human ships began to change. Their sleek hulls seemed to shift and extend, revealing hidden systems that had been concealed beneath their outer armor. What had appeared to be 12 separate vessels started moving closer together, their formations tightening until they were almost touching. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, his voice filled with confusion. "The human ships are connecting to each other. Our computers don't understand what they're doing." Vexthok leaned forward in his chair, watching as the 12 human vessels locked together with mechanical precision. Where there had been a small fleet moments before, there was now something else entirely, something his tactical computers had no classification for. "What are those humans doing?" he demanded. The answer came from Captain Park's voice. Broadcast, across all frequencies with quiet confidence. "Admiral Vexthok, you wanted to see what human engineering is capable of. Allow us to introduce you to something new." The transformation happening before Admiral Vexthok's eyes defied everything he knew about starship design. The 12 human vessels moved with mechanical precision that seemed impossible for separate ships. Metal panels slid apart on their hulls, revealing connection ports and extending mechanical arms that reached toward neighboring vessels. "Sir, our sensors are having trouble tracking them," reported the Zephyrian sensor operator, his voice tight with confusion. "The ships are merging into a single structure. I've never seen anything like this." Vexthok watched the tactical display as the diamond formation of human ships compressed into a tight line. Each vessel locked onto the next with loud metallic clanks that echoed across space. What had been 12 individual warships was becoming something entirely different. On the bridge of the lead human ship, Captain Lisa Park sat calmly in her command chair as the docking procedures completed around her. The hull of her vessel shuddered slightly as the final connections locked into place. Red lights changed to green across her control panels. "All ships report successful docking," announced Lieutenant Commander Ryan Burke from his tactical station. His hands moved quickly over his controls, bringing online systems that had been hidden during their approach. "Structural integrity at maximum. All connection points secure." Captain Park nodded and opened a channel to the other 11 ship commanders, who were now part of her extended crew. "Captains, report your status." One by one, the voices of her fellow commanders filled the communication system. "Engineering section online and ready. Weapons array fully charged. Navigation system synchronized. Life support integrated across all modules." The Zephyrian fleet hung in space, momentarily stunned by what they were witnessing. The human ships had become a single massive platform nearly 2 kilometers long. Its surface bristled with weapon ports that had been completely hidden when the ships were separate. The smooth, angular hull seemed to ripple with energy as power flowed between the connected vessels. "What is that thing?" Vexthok demanded, his 4 eyes studying the display. His tactical computer was struggling to classify the human construct. The system kept changing its analysis, unable to decide if it was looking at one ship or 12, a space station, or a weapon platform. Lieutenant Karmesh worked frantically at her communications console. "Sir, I'm detecting massive power buildup from the human formation. Energy levels are increasing beyond anything our sensors have recorded." The human platform began to rotate slowly in space, presenting its broadside to the Zephyrian fleet. Along its length, weapon ports that had never been visible on the individual ships started to open. The entire structure seemed to be one enormous weapon system disguised as a small fleet. Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez monitored the power flow from her station in what had been the engine room of her ship, but was now the central power distribution hub for the entire platform. Banks of computers around her displayed energy readings that would have been impossible for a single vessel to generate. "Captain Park," she called over the intercom, "all fusion reactors are online and synchronized. We're generating enough power To supply a small city. The main weapon is charging ahead of schedule. Captain Park smiled slightly as she watched the Zephyrian fleet begin to react to their transformation. She could see the larger ships turning to bring their weapons to bear, but they were moving slowly, like giant beasts trying to swat at something they didn't understand. "Ryan, what's our target priority?" she asked her tactical officer. Lieutenant Commander Burke studied his displays, analyzing the Zephyrian formation. "The flagship Worldbreaker is at the center of their formation. If we can eliminate their command ship, the rest of the fleet will likely break formation." "Agreed. Target the Worldbreaker and prepare to fire." The human platform's main weapon was unlike anything that existed in the galactic databases. It ran the entire length of the combined ships, using magnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. But this weapon wasn't designed to fire solid ammunition. Instead, it could focus and direct pure energy with precision that conventional weapons couldn't match. Admiral Vexthok finally overcame his shock and began issuing orders. "All ships, open fire immediately. Destroy that thing before it can attack." The Zephyrian fleet unleashed a massive barrage of plasma bolts and kinetic rounds. Hundreds of weapons fired simultaneously, creating a wall of destructive energy racing toward the human platform. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But something extraordinary happened when the attack reached its target. Instead of exploding against the human hull, the enemy fire seemed to be absorbed by shimmering energy fields that surrounded the platform. The plasma bolts and kinetic rounds struck the shields and simply disappeared, their energy drawn into the human weapon systems. "Impossible," Vexthok whispered as he watched his fleet's attack being completely negated. "No shields can absorb that much firepower." Amy Rodriguez watched her power readings climb as the Zephyrian attack fed energy directly into their systems. "Captain, the energy absorption shields are working perfectly. We're actually gaining power from their attack. All systems are now at 120% of normal capacity." The human platform finished its rotation, now pointing directly at the Zephyrian flagship. Along its length, the main weapon glowed with barely contained energy. The absorbed power from the enemy attack had supercharged their systems beyond their original design specifications. Captain Park opened a channel to the entire Zephyrian fleet. Her voice carried the authority of someone who held absolute tactical advantage. "Admiral Vexthok, you have just witnessed human defensive technology. Now you will see our offensive capabilities." The main weapon of the Terra's hammer began its firing sequence. Energy flowed through magnetic coils running the length of 12 connected ships. The power buildup was visible as a bright glow that ran from the rear of the platform to its forward tip. The weapon was designed to focus all that energy into a beam that could punch through any known armor. "Sir, energy readings from the human platform are off our scales," reported the Zephyrian sensor operator. "Whatever they're about to do, it's going to be massive." Vexthok stared at the tactical display, finally understanding that his fleet faced something completely beyond their experience. The humans hadn't sent 12 ships to fight his armada. They had sent one incredibly sophisticated weapon system that had disguised itself as a small fleet. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," he shouted. "Get us away from that thing." But it was too late. The Terra's hammer had completed its targeting sequence. The massive Zephyrian flagship hung in space like a sitting target, too large and slow to avoid what was coming. Captain Park gave the order that would change everything. "Fire!" The beam that erupted from the human platform was not just a weapon. It was a demonstration of human engineering capabilities. Pure concentrated energy, powered by the absorbed firepower of the entire Zephyrian fleet, lanced across space, at nearly the speed of light. The beam was perfectly focused, containing enough power to vaporize anything in its path. The Worldbreaker, Admiral Vexthok's mighty flagship that had conquered 17 star systems, simply ceased to exist. The energy beam struck at dead center, and the massive dreadnought vanished in a brief flash of light. There was no explosion, no debris field. One moment the ship was there, the next moment there was empty space. The beam continued past where the flagship had been, striking 2 more Zephyrian capital ships before finally dissipating In the space of 3 seconds, the humans had eliminated the 3 most powerful vessels in the enemy fleet. Silence filled the space around Kepler 442 as both fleets absorbed what had just happened. The Zephyrian Armada, which had seemed unstoppable just minutes before, now faced an enemy that had just demonstrated the ability to erase their largest ships with a single shot. The age of human military technology had just announced itself to the galaxy. The silence that followed the destruction of the World Breaker was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. 257 Zephyrian ships hung motionless in space, their crews staring at empty space where their flagship had been just seconds before. The most powerful warship in their fleet had been erased as if it had never existed. Commander Ben Taylor sat at his station aboard the Terra's Hammer, monitoring the enemy fleet's reactions through dozens of sensors. As the strategic coordinator for the human formation, he had spent months planning for this moment, but seeing the actual result still amazed him. "Captain Park," he reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. "Enemy fleet has ceased all offensive actions. Most ships appear to be in complete shock. I'm detecting emergency communications across their entire command structure." Captain Lisa Park studied the tactical display showing the scattered Zephyrian formation. Without their flagship, the enemy fleet looked like a pack of animals that had suddenly lost their leader. Ships were turning in different directions, some trying to retreat while others moved forward as if they couldn't decide what to do. "Any attempts to reorganize their attack?" she asked. "Negative," Commander Taylor replied. "They seem paralyzed. I don't think they understand what just happened to them." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Burke looked up from his weapons console, where power readings still showed incredible energy levels flowing through the Terra's Hammer. "Captain, we still have enough stored energy for at least 3 more shots of that magnitude. The Zephyrian attack actually gave us more power than we expected." Captain Park nodded thoughtfully. The plan had worked even better than their scientists had predicted. The energy absorption shields hadn't just protected them from enemy fire, they had turned the Zephyrian attack into fuel for their own weapons. It was a perfect example of human engineering philosophy. Take your enemy's strength and use it against them. Aboard one of the surviving Zephyrian destroyers, Captain Zektar struggled to understand what his sensors were telling him. He had served in the Empire's fleet for 20 years, had participated in the conquest of 7 star systems, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. "Communications officer," he called across his bridge. "Are you receiving any orders from Fleet Command?" The young officer at the communications station looked confused and frightened. "Sir, there is no Fleet Command. The World Breaker is gone. Admiral Vex Thok is dead. I'm receiving dozens of different signals from other ships, but nobody seems to know what we should do." Zektar looked at his tactical display, studying the human platform that had just demonstrated power beyond anything in the Zephyrian military database. The Terra's Hammer rotated slowly in space, its weapon system still glowing with contained energy. It looked like a sleeping predator that could wake up and strike again at any moment. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, "the human platform is moving. They're changing position to target our heavy cruiser formation." On the Terra's Hammer, Captain Park watched as panic began to spread through the Zephyrian fleet. Ships were breaking formation, some trying to run while others moved erratically as their captains tried to figure out how to fight an enemy they couldn't understand. "Open a channel to the entire Zephyrian fleet," she ordered. The communication system activated, broadcasting her voice to every surviving enemy ship. When she spoke, her tone was calm and professional, like a teacher explaining a simple lesson to confused students. "Zephyrian forces, this is Captain Lisa Park. Your admiral is dead. Your flagship is destroyed. You now face a simple choice. You can continue this fight and discover what other capabilities human technology possesses, or you can withdraw from the system and all occupied territories immediately." The response came from multiple Zephyrian ships at once, creating a chaos of overlapping voices and conflicting orders. Some captains wanted to attack, driven by pride and military training. Others argued for retreat, having seen enough to understand they were completely outmatched. Commander Taylor monitored the enemy communications, sorting through the confusion with help from the platform's translation computers. Captain, approximately 60% of their ships are requesting permission to withdraw. The rest seem to be arguing about whether to attack or retreat. Any ships moving to attack positions? Captain Park asked. 3 heavy cruisers are forming up for what looks like a coordinated assault. The rest are holding position or slowly backing away. Captain Park studied the tactical display, watching the 3 Zephyrian cruisers as they moved into attack formation. Each ship was massive, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire cities. Under normal circumstances, they would be formidable opponents. But these weren't normal circumstances. "Target the lead cruiser," she ordered. "Minimal power setting. We don't need to destroy them, just disable their engines." The Terra's hammer adjusted its aim, focusing on the approaching Zephyrian cruiser. The main weapon began charging again, but this time the energy buildup was much smaller. Instead of the devastating beam that had erased the Worldbreaker, they were preparing a precise strike designed to cripple rather than destroy. The lead Zephyrian cruiser opened fire first, launching everything it had at the human platform. Plasma, bolts and kinetic rounds streaked across space, followed by experimental energy weapons that the Empire had been developing for their next major campaign. Once again, the human energy shields absorbed the incoming fire, channeling the enemy's attack into their own power systems. The absorption was so complete that it looked like the Zephyrian weapons had simply disappeared upon contact with the Terra's hammer. "Enemy fire absorbed," reported Amy Rodriguez from her engineering station. "Power levels increasing. All systems operating within normal parameters." Captain Park waited until the Zephyrian attack had completely spent itself, then gave the order. "Fire." The beam that lanced out from the Terra's hammer was smaller than the one that had destroyed the flagship, but it was precisely aimed. It struck the lead cruiser's engine section, severing the power conduits and fusion containment systems that drove the massive ship. The cruiser immediately went dark, drifting powerless in space. The demonstration had its intended effect. The other 2 attacking cruisers stopped their advance and began backing away from the human platform. Across the Zephyrian fleet, ship after ship began turning away from the battle zone. Captain Zektar watched the disabled cruiser drift helplessly and made his decision. "Communications. Send a message to all remaining Zephyrian vessels. We are withdrawing from the system immediately. Any ship that wishes to continue fighting can do so alone." His destroyer turned away from the Terra's hammer and began accelerating toward the edge of the system. Within minutes, most of the surviving Zephyrian fleet was following his example. Ship after ship activated their faster-than-light drives and disappeared into hyperspace. Commander Taylor watched the retreat on his sensors. "Captain, we're down to about 30 enemy ships still in the system. Most of those appear to be damaged and trying to reach minimum safe distance for hyperspace." "Jumps." Captain Park opened the communication channel one more time. "This is your final warning. Any Zephyrian ship remaining in this system in 5 minutes will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." The last 30 ships didn't wait for the 5-minute deadline. They jumped to hyperspace within 2 minutes, leaving the Kepler 442 system empty except for the Terra's hammer and the grateful colonists on Harmony Colony below. "Mission accomplished," Captain Park announced to her crew. "The Zephyrian threat to this system has been eliminated. Prepare to separate the platform and return to individual ship configurations." News of the battle at Kepler 442 spread across the galaxy faster than the fleeing Zephyrian ships could travel. Within hours, every major species had received reports of what the humans had done. A fleet of 12 small ships had defeated the most powerful military force in known space. The impossible had become reality. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in his quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel, reading the flood of messages that had arrived from across the galaxy. Government officials, military commanders, and trade representatives were all sending urgent communications to Earth. The species that had dismissed humanity just 1 week ago were now desperately trying to establish better relations. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Jake activated his communication screen and saw the familiar face of Captain Lisa Park. She looked tired but satisfied, sitting in her ready room aboard the Defiance. Behind her, he could see the other ships of her squadron through the viewport, now separated back into their individual configurations. "Admiral," she said with a slight smile. "Mission accomplished. The Zephyrian fleet has withdrawn from all contested territories. We're receiving surrender requests from their remaining commanders throughout the Outer Rim." Jake nodded with satisfaction. "Outstanding work, Captain. What's the status of your ships and crew?" "All vessels are undamaged and ready for further operations. The Terra's hammer performed even better than our engineers predicted. The energy absorption systems worked flawlessly, and the modular connection sequence completed without any problems." "And the Galaxy's reaction?" Captain Park's smile grew wider. "I think it's safe to say we have their attention, sir. We've received over 300 communication requests in the past 6 hours. Everyone wants to know how we did it." Jake looked at the pile of diplomatic messages on his desk. "I imagine they do. Return to Earth immediately, Captain. I have a feeling we're going to be very busy in the coming weeks." 3 days later, Jake found himself back in the Galactic Council chambers, but the atmosphere was completely different from his last visit. The same alien delegates sat in their ornate chairs, but now they watched him with expressions of respect and curiosity instead of dismissal and amusement. Council Prime Zethkari stood as Jake entered the hall. His 6 arms moved in what Jake had learned was a formal gesture of greeting among his species. "Admiral Morrison, the Council welcomes you and thanks you for your service to galactic peace." Jake took his place at the speaking platform, looking up at the assembled representatives. "Thank you, Council Prime. I'm pleased to report that the Zephyrian threat has been eliminated. Their fleet has withdrawn from all occupied territories, and their government has requested peace negotiations." A murmur of amazement ran through the hall. Several delegates who had laughed at human military capabilities just a week ago now leaned forward in their seats, eager to hear every word. The Vorthan delegate, its crystal form chiming softly, was the first to speak. "Admiral Morrison, our sensors recorded the battle at Kepler 442. We would be honored to learn more about human military technology. Perhaps we could arrange an exchange of scientific information?" Similar offers came from around the hall. The Altarians wanted to discuss trade agreements. The Nebulans were interested in joint military exercises. Species that Jake had never heard of were requesting formal diplomatic meetings with Earth. Zethkari raised his arms for silence. "Admiral Morrison, the Council would like to make a formal request. We ask that humanity consider taking a leadership role in galactic defense. Your demonstrated capabilities make you uniquely qualified to protect the peace we have all enjoyed." Jake had expected this request. The Council was offering humanity a position of real power and influence in galactic politics. It was everything Earth had hoped for when they first made contact with alien civilizations 50 years ago. "The Human Federation appreciates the Council's confidence," Jake replied carefully. "However, we believe that galactic defense should remain a cooperative effort among all species. We're willing to share our defensive technologies with any civilization that commits to peaceful purposes." This offer caused excited discussions throughout the hall. The idea of accessing human technology was clearly appealing to every species present. But Jake wasn't finished. "There is one condition," he continued, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Any species that receives human technology must agree to use it only for defense. We will not arm aggressors or support conquest. The galaxy has seen enough war." Council Prime Zethkari nodded solemnly. "Your terms are more than fair, Admiral. The Council accepts these conditions and looks forward to a new era of cooperation with humanity." As Jake left the Council chambers, he reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. Humanity had gone from being dismissed as insignificant newcomers to being recognized as a major galactic power. But more importantly, they had proven that superior technology didn't have to be used for conquest. Later that day, Jake stood in the observation deck of the Earth Diplomatic Station, watching as representatives from dozens of species arrived for meetings with human officials. Trade negotiations, technology exchanges, and defense agreements were being discussed in conference rooms throughout the station. Commander Ben Taylor joined him at the viewport, carrying a data pad filled with reports from across human space. "Admiral, we're receiving requests for the Terra's hammer blueprints from 17 different species. How should we respond?" Jake smiled as he watched a Zephyrian diplomatic vessel dock at the station. Even the former aggressors were now seeking peaceful relations with humanity. "We'll share the basic defensive technologies, but the weapon systems remain classified. We want to help protect the galaxy, not arm it for the next war." "Yes, sir." "And what about the Zephyrian peace negotiations?" "Handle them fairly," Jake replied. "They've learned their lesson. The galaxy is big enough for everyone if we all remember to respect each other." As he spoke, Jake could see more ships arriving at the station. Alien vessels of every size and design, all coming to meet with the species they had underestimated just days before. The sight filled him with pride, not because humanity had proven superior in battle, but because they had used their strength to create peace instead of conquest. The human insignia on his uniform represented more than just Earth. Now, it stood for the idea that sometimes the smallest force could make the biggest difference, especially when that force was guided by wisdom rather than aggression. In the depths of space, the 12 ships of Captain Park's squadron traveled together toward Earth, their modular connection systems hidden once again beneath their sleek hulls. They looked like ordinary vessels to any casual observer, but appearances could be deceiving. The galaxy had learned that lesson well. The age of human influence in galactic politics had begun, built not on fear or conquest, but on the respect earned through superior engineering and the wisdom to use power responsibly. The tiny fleet had proven that in space, as on Earth, it was not the size of the force that mattered, but how that force chose to use its strength.